Today's guest is one of the most resourceful founders I know. Zeryab Cheema started his first tech company in high school and literally posing as his dad to close deals, and went on to scale and exit a business for 7 figures as a 19-year-old. He then founded Hop, a transport technology company now powering Amazon's last mile logistics in New South Wales, expanding into Dubai, and becoming a serious player in the mobility and infrastructure space. In this episode, we unpack the pivots, capital raises, shareholder buybacks, and the role tech played in scaling a complex business. If you're building in a traditional industry and looking for modernization through tech, this one's for you. Let's get into it. So we've known each other for 7 years. It's been a really good journey around Devika and Hop, but what I want to do is start right at the beginning. I know you had a venture before we met, and it was all the way back to when you were in high school. So let's start there. I want to know exactly what that journey was like and go from there.
Sure. So I started off 13 years ago with my first business. Being a high school student, the motivation to build or do something outside of school was quite large. So apps were still starting out to becoming something mainstream. So given that the iPhone had just launched a few years back from there, this was back in 2012. Given our background as a family in the taxi industry, the first project was a mobile application for booking taxis based in Sydney, Australia. Finding the right developer started out to be a massive issue for us. So we found someone local that was doing the work offshore, built or put something together that we could launch in the market, found that we couldn't launch it after a few attempts, kept getting rejected on the App Store and for other reasons. We then shifted the project overseas, found some amazing guys to work with, launched in the Sydney market when it was quite competitive. This was obviously before the entry of Uber in the Australian market. Eventually found our way to the UK market after a few options popped up there, and ended up then evolving that project to an exit a few years later.
So you talk about building an app and having that journey of the ups and downs, but what was it like even funding it was back then? I know tech was not where it is today, and it can be really probably a lot more difficult than what it is today to build, but then also funding it and going through those rounds and getting to market.
Yeah, our first company was self-funded. So it was funding from friends and family, and obviously using any means through loans and credit cards.
So how did you convince adults to invest in your idea?
Yeah, I think being 15, the first person to convince was my dad.
Yeah.
And obviously we did what we could as a family. Backing a project for a teenager is difficult, and winning over the trust as well. It took a few months. We did a step-by-step, got the first prototype built within a budget of, it was around $20,000 back then. Once that prototype was built, took it to market, obviously learned a lot along that way as well. Had to do a lot of it myself as well, from designing some of the coding as well. And then obviously speaking to some international partners and convincing them on, and being under 18, that was a very difficult conversation to have as well. So the age factor was something that I would not bring up or try my best to avoid. And that led to, I guess, our dealings with PayPal, with TeamSpeak, and a lot of global companies.
So what was that process like? Just a lot of phone calls, not showing up as a 15-year-old for them to figure it out?
Yeah, I think that was definitely the strategy that we went down, keeping that factor away and just using that as a dialogue. So we would always have the conversation sticking to the point that we're trying to get across. So by the time that we did meet up, age was less of a conversation than anything else.
The deal was done.
Yes.
Very good. And then, so you were in Australia, and then how did you end up in the UK? What was that journey like?
Yeah, so researching where we could go was something at the back of my mind. So launching 2012 with the first company. Before we entered the UK market, that was 2 years down the track. So 2014, looking at different opportunities, we discovered that the UK black cab market was predominantly cash only back then. So there were a lot of payment providers in the market, but there was no uptake by taxi drivers in that market. So we, at that point in time, did not have a payment solution, but we had a booking solution. And then understand that we could design and develop something quite efficient and quite quickly, we started to explore a conversation with other payment providers, came across a great company called iZettle, which later got acquired by PayPal for their largest ever cash transaction. Spoke to them and they made some introductions into the UK black cab market. There was a clear opportunity to start integrating and rolling out our payment terminal there. We had a great run because of working quite closely with iZettle as a partner. And again, this was probably in the late teens, so around 18 or 19. So by that time, it was a lot of the conversations had happened over the phone. saw them in person. We then were embedded with them with a great partnership. And towards the end of 2016, there was legislation that came out that every black cab had to have a payment solution by a set date, late October. And we were in the market, we had the devices, we had the technology, and the uptake from there was grand. And that led to later our exit in that market as well.
So what was like the first cab ride booking payment like for you?
Yeah, it was very exciting. I think seeing people embrace our product and solution and the way we got it out there. So we would infiltrate and speak to people on the ground. So getting through to taxi drivers, winning them over. We work with the second largest black cab fleet provider in London, and that built a lot of credibility for us, and obviously building out those partnerships and incentives as well. A couple of things that we learned along the way was having something as a free offering is never the best way to go into the market as well. We had our payment devices initially free of charge, and there was hardly anyone taking that up. And when we set a small price to it, I think it was around £30 back then, the growth that we saw was astronomical. And so people,
How did you go from going from £0 to £30? Like, what was the decision made there? Thinking that if you're after growth and uptake, to then charge more and that be a better result?
Yeah, the feedback that we were getting from people was very skeptical.
Mm-hmm.
So why is this free? This payment device should be costing something. There should be some price to it. So why is this free? Is it a less reliable solution? Is it less trustworthy? Given payments is a very trust-built industry, you have to be able to win over the customer. This was obviously payments that anyone would be paying through, and the driver was responsible. So going with the right payment provider was crucial for them. So building credibility in the marketplace is very crucial. So yes, we had won over taxi drivers and taxi groups, but at the same time, having a low cost offering for a faceless brand is difficult to then sell. So then having a price point where, yes, someone's paying a certain cost to it, the way they then judge that product and solution is very different to having just a free solution where there's no incentive for them to take it up because they've paid nothing for it. So they're more than likely to then just discard that product as well later.
Yeah, interesting. So the perceived value of it was not there because it was zero.
Yes, and the market position is quite crucial as well. So it's very important to position yourself correctly in the market, that this is a product that costs something because it's offering you something as well in return. So there was a lot of analytics, there's a lot of data behind what we were doing. So we would study and look at how customers were obviously seeing the product as well, or the solution. And we saw that they were loving the way they were paying, that it was working well for them, and there was no reason why someone from a driver's perspective wouldn't pay for something that we were offering.
Okay, cool. So you've gone to the market, you've started to charge, you've started to get product market fit. Then how long later till you get that acquisition? So the regulation comes in somewhere there, and then what was that journey like to then the acquisition?
Yeah, we were working very closely with the second largest fleet provider. So that relationship kept growing further and further. And they were seeing the growth that we were having as well. So as that conversation evolved, they were placing, I guess, the subtle sort of offers on the table to take this up within their fleet. And then obviously get others involved in the market as well. So this was around exactly the time that the discussion was brewing up as well. So around October of 2016. Now, during the same time, it was probably 2 or 3 months from then, we were having a conversation already with what to do next. So those two conversations happening together meant that it was making more and more sense to take up an offer and then move on to the next venture, which would still be in the transport space, and that was Hop. So I was spending some time in the UK with my co-founder, Andrew, having a dialogue with Hertz around what their key problem statements were. And one of that was underutilization of assets. So seeing that there was an opportunity coming up for us and the previous business had done well, we were at a high. And I kind of believe that when you're doing your very best and there's enough on the table and you know what you will do next, it's pretty logical then move on and extend your reach further.
Okay, great. So you're 19 years old and you've had a 7-figure exit. What does that feel like? You know, is mum and dad checking the bank account every now and then to make sure you're not doing something silly?
Yeah, I think the responsibility of money was something that check and balance is really crucial and important. So we had some large transactions obviously hit us. One of our largest single transactions was close to the 300K mark, and I was in one transaction. And for that feeling alone is quite surreal. And the way you manage that became a very important lesson, which then led on to even, about a decade or so later as well. So understanding the way you would be spending and investing and where to invest next really was very important, even self-learning. So those travels and those trips were probably the largest expenditure, but that led to more and more conversations as well. And then also, once you've exited the first business, getting that monetary sort of return is one aspect, but also given that the industry now starts to know you and knows that you've had a small exit in the past, it does build a more reliable reputation as well with other partners.
Yeah, great. And for those looking in a similar position to the one that you were in, what was that acquisition process like? Did they buy the company? Did they buy the assets? Was there, any restrictions that came with it? Or what did that look like for you?
Because we were in a favorable position, I think that's where we could command a lot of the terms to be in our favor.
Mm-hmm.
So what that meant for us was highlighting that there would be a one set price plus a dividend sort of payout for the next couple of years based on performance and growth. So having some level of involvement on a management level with the business was negotiated, and we kept that obviously quite in our favor. And as the business was growing as well after, it meant more and more financial returns for us. So that again was well negotiated because the market was in our favor.
Very good. You've had this exit, and then you saw the opportunity that was kind of happening in parallel, it sounds like, which was Hop with Andrew. What was that process like? Tech was probably more prominent at that stage than what it was when you first started.
Yeah, so I think technology from a consumer angle was there, but from our conversations with Hertz and other rental car companies, the way that they're used to doing things was quite archaic, given that they've been around for 100 plus years. They had great growth, great customers, great reach, and it was a very, very good opportunity that we saw, which was how do we then take underutilized assets and redeploy that in different sectors of the market, especially in transport, be it rideshare and logistics. So that led to us engaging with a lot of the car companies before we started to work on that particular sort of approach into the market. So for us, understanding where the value is that we're presenting is very crucial, and also being efficient as well. So not burning through the capital that we had just exited from into our next venture, but just being very smart with that as well.
Yes, because I know that process of starting Hop, you actually had new investors or some, and what was that, the reasoning behind that? So you had your previous exit, you could have used your money to start that next venture. What was that like?
Yeah, I think the conversations became quite organic as well. So we had a lot of people approach and say, we're happy to back whatever you do next. And I think that's when you realize that they're backing the person, not the product. And this was before the product even became a thing. So as those conversations were coming up, the challenge then became of who to take on and who not to take on, and how you would work with them as well. So the education with investors was, again, this was very different as well, going back quite a few years. So it's knowing that, do we go with a debt raise, a capital equity raise, or even other means of raising, be it a safe note or convertible note. So we looked at working with people that we could obviously understand the value that they bring. So was it business smarts or acumen or industry expertise or PE groups? So we raised from about a dozen plus investors. So we grew to about 14 investors by the 2 rounds that we did. And yes, throughout that whole process, we were judging between who to take on, who not to take on. And through that process, there were decisions that made that we can reflect upon even now.
So you started that journey, but what Hop is today wasn't what it was when you first started, and you just mentioned that people back the founder. What were some of those pivotal moments where you had to pivot and start with an idea and get a product to market?
Yeah, a couple of themes were that, one, our product or company was still being built offshore. Mm-hmm. That was number one. And so the visibility over relating the business side with the tech side, there was a big difference between that. There's a big disparity as well. So having that link conversation from my angle was getting more and more challenging. We also introduced into market as a rideshare offering that was using rental cars. So what it is now, it wasn't before. And so as that sort of play in the market was happening, the competitive nature started to heighten between us and other players as well. That meant burn rate was going up. And so investors, you're trying to manage that conversation as well. And so by default, they are trusting you to then lead that on. So through that process, our burn rate was reaching quite a height. And then the decision was made to channel back our involvement in the rideshare market and then really look at what we were really offering, which was we were here to modernize, especially within our sector of transport, things and processes that were done very differently in the past. And that's exactly what we did through our sort of journey through COVID as well.
Very good. So what was it like, in that first company you raised from, let's say, family and friends, and then the second one was more strategic and you had a different lens. What was, I guess, some of the pros and cons of each?
Yeah, I think bootstrapping the first business really let the risk stay on our side, even as a family or as a person as well as an individual. And that adds to pressure, but at the same time, I did not know any different. Even having education around how to raise from the external markets wasn't there. So that was the only given choice, and that worked out well. So it meant the exit was largely shared by one person, let alone by investors. And then with the second business, it was really tapping into their experience, because we did not want to just build a business that would be cash flow positive, but also a large scalable business that could last a long time as well. So it then meant picking out the right investor was very, very important. And as we worked with more closely with different investors, we knew that they had different strengths that they could offer, and even opening up their network. So that did risk the capital aspect of the business, but it also really opened up conversations with people that we couldn't really have in the past.
So you mentioned earlier that there was the business aspect, and then there was the technical aspect, and the technology was being developed offshore, and you needed more transparency in order to drive the product and the enhancements and where you were heading. What was the decision that made you go, okay, I want to bring this onshore and find a tech partner?
So I think that the technical language barrier is a thing that sort of comes up as well. So you could explain the impact of a feature from a technical lens, but how do you explain it from a business lens? So this particular feature is all I need to generate X amount of money. It may not be really communicating the best approach when you're working with an offshore agency or an agency that does not have experience in that particular sector. So we were finding that more and more challenging. So then that led to our search locally. Initially, it wasn't really a price comparison. It was more so finding the right people that could even understand what we were doing. So there was two key decisions that had to be made. One was, do we just extend on from the work that was done locally, or do we just rewrite everything locally again? And how would that work from a cost perspective as well? Judging and juggling between that became something that we had to really come to a decision with. Otherwise, we would be in a very, very poor state in a very quick point in time.
So Hop was one of Devika Ventures' first investments and tech partners. So what was that journey like for you as the founder? So you saying that it wasn't just about price, it was about being there on the journey and understanding what your needs were, not just potentially doing as as we were told, but more critiquing and providing feedback and assisting in that process. What was that like for you around making that decision and moving forward with it?
I think what attracted us most about Devika was their revenue-centric approach, which is, does this lot of features, will they actually make you money, or are they just going to be something that looks, really, really good in an app? So I think that really cut out the noise for us, and it allowed us to focus on what would actually impact the product and the audience. So that narrow focus then led to us discovering where our place is in the industry as well. So what are we as a company? And I think that is something that has really, really changed for us over the last couple of years. So we didn't just want to be something that's restricted to one industry or sector like rideshare. We want to be something that extends on throughout transport. And then what sets us apart should and always has been technology. So how do we do things efficiently with less and less people, but with a larger and larger impact as well on the other side? So that relationship with Devika started to resonate quite well for us. And from a ventures angle, that investment and trust into what we want to do and having them onboarded as a partner really aided us in that transformation as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you had to make a definitive moment where it was like, do you continue to build on what you have, or do you do a rewrite? And that can always be super daunting. I know Simon from Culture Kings always talks about moving from Magento to Shopify when he already had a really successful business, and there's that sunk cost and that decision that needs to really be made. What was that decision process like for you?
It was a decision that we couldn't take lightly, because we had worked with that developer for a number of years across the previous business as well. So it meant that we had to really understand where that partner would take us in the future. And it wasn't really judging between talents. It was more so where we could actually communicate our vision quite quickly and strategically as well. So the decision to then go onshore became more and more clear, and the cost could be justified as well, because you're building a business not looking at the next 12 months or 24 months, but for the next 5 or 10 years. And so when we look at it on a long-term sort of horizon, the costs become less and less relative.
So we've mentioned that we've built this product, and we've got the likes of Hertz and all these different other companies that are using it and are becoming more aware of who Hop is and in the transport and mobility market. So what was it like then extending out that to what you're doing now with, let's say, Amazon?
Yeah, so I think as we sort of had more conversations around transformation journeys within the people around us, it was attracting more and more conversations. So then we had a dealing with Nextport, which then later became Go Zero. So we did a couple of projects and interactions with them a couple of years ago, and this was throughout COVID. So that allowed us to refocus our energy away from P2P transport or consumer-facing businesses to more so B2B. So working with that approach, it obviously opened up a lot of doors for us. And through that process, we did some dealings with Amazon initially as a car or vehicle supplier. And that was a very healthy relationship that we had. And then a couple of years later, we then did a partnership with them around the last mile segment of powering their delivery arm in New South Wales. So we are one of the partners that look after a certain part of New South Wales and look after their last mile delivery. I mean, through that process, or before that process even initiated, we had made some investments within our sector in transport as well. And so we were then getting a bit of a taste of what logistics and last mile logistics in particular would look like, and the scale that they were growing as well. And I guess the partnership with Amazon was quite attractive and quite lucrative.
And what kind of role did tech play in, let's say, these relationships, and then also your subject matter expert in that industry provide for these other partners and collaborators that you're working with?
I think one thing that then became quite inbuilt in our DNA over the last couple of years was that with technology, we can scale faster, and it becomes less and less of a labor-intensive business and more so a business built on scale and efficiency. So we could bring that same mindset to our dealings with Nextport, with Amazon, with any of the rental providers as well. And that is what we did. So it's like, well, what can one person do with the right systems and processes in place? And then how can that be replicated, being more and less person-centric and more technology-driven? And we saw that scale then becomes quite largely infinite. So if you're getting the right systems in place and you're building for the future, and that is probably what resonates well with our dealings with Amazon, which is that their approach to building large projects in mind, but now in the present. And that is probably one of the reasons that we work quite closely with them as well.
Yeah, very good. So then it expands out even further. So you're now working in Dubai, and they have the government that's looking to take up some of your services and products. And what's that journey been like for you? I know as an investor coming into Hop, it's been really, really great to be able to go to Dubai together and see what's happening and talk to different partners and collaborators and see how we can expand out what Hop is doing in those different countries. So what's that been like for you?
Hop wants to stand out as a technology-driven transport company, and we want to do that globally, not just be restricted to Australia. And when we started to make our investments in companies like Clicko, Trax, and amongst others, we noticed that there was a pattern in what we were doing, which is working with other businesses that could scale a lot faster and then just optimizing the operations for them. So that similar pattern was then discovered with opportunities in Dubai as well, where we could work with the road and transport authorities there, with other government sectors, bringing our knowledge and expertise and technology implementation, and then allowing them to modernize their current processes and also then build to scale as well. So that has worked out to be quite an interesting opportunity as well for us. So we're going to be focusing a lot of our efforts into that region. And this is probably largely backed by the way that our investors also see where the business is heading, that we're becoming more and more established. It's been about 8 years now into Hop's journey. So we are looking at what we can do in the next 5 to 6 years as well. And where would that take us?
Yeah, so if we look at the next 5 or 10 years for Hop, who are these ideal clients or collaborations? What does Hop look for when doing a collaboration?
Hop's now branched out to 3 key parts of what we're focusing on. So we've got our group company with 3 different arms. One arm focusing on operations, be it in logistics or rideshare. And then we've got another arm of our business that is technology driven, so doing services for companies within our sector and in industry, be it in Australia or globally. And the third arm is investments, which we're writing up checks alongside large investors in companies such as Clicko and others. So where we want to be seeing ourselves in the next 5 years is onboarding more and more partners, especially in our operations arm, because we know what it takes to launch a partnership within a 3-month period. We will also want to obviously double down on our focus on providing those services to those high growth companies, be it government agencies as well, offshore. So working closely with the governments in Dubai or the governments in London, we want to obviously explore what that looks like as well. So in the next sort of 5 years, the vision is to obviously grow this into more of a global play and obviously cement our feet more as well with the investments that we write up here as well.
So most people go into building a startup with a 6 or 9 year journey and then look at an exit. It feels like you're 8 years in and you want to double down and really focus on more of a global expansion, especially post-COVID. And during that journey, you're now starting to buy out your current investors. What's that process been like for other founders looking to do something similar?
We've sat down quite closely with our partners and looked at what our shareholders obviously have offered and given us. And until date, obviously that journey has been amazing. And they've backed us through the different phases that we've transformed as well. So once that conversation obviously was being held, we uncovered that there was an opportunity to start giving a return to these investors. So last couple of years, we had been paying our dividends. We then initiated a share buyback as well at a premium price. And that obviously meant that investors were getting a return on their money. So as a startup, that's very important to really give back to investors as well, because they've backed your business based on your vision alone. So that became our core focus as well from a financial standpoint. We did a couple of shareholder buybacks. We'll continue to do so as well. And that does mean that we would then reduce it down to a smaller shareholder base, really looking to then cement our place for the next 10, 15 years or however long that takes as well.
So finally, if I was a startup looking to build something in the logistics or mobility space, what does the next 12 or 24 months look like in a pretty dynamic economy and global outlook right now?
You do need to sort of understand what your core strength is. And I think that was very important for us. It took us a number of years to identify what our core strength was. And then doubling down and backing that is very important as well. So you don't need a dozen partners or a dozen clients to build a great business. If you can find a solution to offer to that one client that's willing to take your business on, that's very crucial. So being very smart and efficient with the capital that you have is probably the key message in these times. So understanding that the next 12 to 24 months is more of an economic cycle. And once this does go away, those that would be winning from this are those that have made the right decisions now. So having that in mind where you're making the decisions today, looking into the future is very crucial. And that's exactly what we're doing as well. So if you've got a business or an idea, this is probably the best time to start to tweak and work on it as well, because the market is changing. So shifting alongside that market will then give you a better place once this tide has sort of turned.
Yeah, very wise words. I know we're really excited about what Hop is doing now and into the future. And it's the reason why we're also doubling down in this phase with you guys. And we're really excited to see what happens. And it's been a pleasure working together for the last 7 years. And thank you for today.
No, thank you. And we're pleased to have Devika Ventures as an investor.
Thank you.